time of Solomon that it was like rocks along the road, the Bible says. It was so prevalent. But the children of Israel found out what Mark 8:36 declares, for what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? The people were now dying in great numbers because there was no food or water. When you're starving, when you're dying of thirst, the thought of gold kind of loses its shine. It becomes tarnished because it's of no use now. Can't eat gold. There ain't no food or water. Gold is of no use. How has the gold become dim? How has the most fine gold changed? There's people that are rich beyond our wildest imagination, but when you lose your health, all the gold in the world can't get it back. You realize you got your health, you're a rich man. Many Christians forsake God, having loved this present world, only to find out that the devil deceives them with fool's gold, fake pearls, and costume jewelry. All that glitters is not gold. Solomon himself, the wisest man that ever lived, went on a spiritual quest to find out the meaning of life. He tried everything this world had to offer, only to find out it was all a dead end. All that mattered was fearing God and keeping His commandments. Like the prodigal son, many Christians waste their lives in the pursuit of pleasure and possession, only to find out how empty their lives are without God. The second meaning of this passage is found in verse 2. The precious sons of Zion, comparable to fine gold, how are they esteemed as earthen pitchers, the work of the hands of the potter? Israel's young men had once been compared to the finest gold, but now they were compared to clay pots. Clay was common in Israel, and most of their vessels were made from clay. And when a clay pot would break or have a crack in it, it wasn't repaired, it was simply thrown out and replaced. Sadly, because the children of Israel had rejected God, God now rejects them as broken clay pots are rejected and thrown away. It's terrible. Israel had become full of pride, and in referring to them as clay, God is reminding them that they're nothing but a lump of clay that God has breathed life into. You want to stay humble, just pick up some dirt and roll it around in your hands sometime and just go, you realize that's what we were until God breathed life into us. Nothing but a lump of clay. We came from dust. We shall return to dust. Kind of puts things in perspective. Going to funerals is a wake-up call because you realize you leave this world the same way you came into it, with nothing. You can't take nothing with you. People are buried in their cars, they're buried with their gold, buried with their trinkets, and guess what? They're dead and gone, and them things still stay in the ground or in the tomb, wherever they are. It's all left behind. Again, the gold of this world loses its shine when compared with the pure gold in heaven. The streets of heaven will be paved, not paved, covered, but they will be pure gold. Pure gold in heaven. Verses 3 and 4. Even the sea monsters draw out the breast. They give suck to their young ones. The daughter of my people has become cruel, like ostriches in the wilderness. The tongue of the sucking child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst. The young children ask bread. Here Jeremiah reveals what's taking place in Jerusalem during the siege. The people of Jerusalem were starving. They could no longer feed their children, so they simply left them to die. Left them off somewhere and just walked off. Jeremiah mentions sea monsters. Whether he's talking about dinosaurs or whales or some other sea creature, the point he's making is that these creatures find some way to feed their offspring. These sea creatures have more on the ball than many people. Our children didn't ask to be born. We brought our children into this world, and our most basic instinct is to provide for our families. And yet many foolishly squander away their money on booze and drugs while their family goes hungry. I preached at Atlantic City Rescue Mission. People were living under the boardwalk because they gambled away all their money. Others have squandered everything they had where they can't even put food on the table because they just threw it all away for drugs. Horrible thing when you hear some of the stories of people. Jeremiah then compares the people to ostriches. Ostriches would lay their eggs, then literally bury their head in the sand. They would lay their eggs, then wander off somewhere, leaving the eggs unprotected. That's why you don't see a whole lot of ostriches. Some animal will come along, eat the egg. That was that. If we don't take an interest in the lives of our children, we may lose them. The devil's on our doorstep and he's trying to get in. And if we're not on the lookout for the enemy, we may find our homes under attack. Any thoughts or questions on that? Verses 4 and 5. The tongue of the sucking child cleaves to the roof of his mouth for thirst. The young children ask bread, and no man breaketh it unto them. They that did feed delicately are desolate in the streets. They that were brought up in scarlet embrace dunghills. The power of the description of what Jeremiah is describing is amazing to me. Here we read of the heartache caused by hunger and thirst. One of the results of dehydration or loss of water is that the tongue swells up. It happened to Jesus. It's mentioned in Psalm 22 that his tongue swelled up, making talking very difficult. Imagine seeing something like this, children asking for bread, not having anything to eat. America is a wealthy nation. Most Americans live pretty good, while almost 2/3 of the world suffer from disease, lack of food and water. Poverty is rampant. I was talking to John the other day. I was asking him, what do they do with all that food that they have there? See, he works in seafood. Good stuff. Stuff that can feed a third world country. They throw it out. It's hard to believe that I know there's people outside these doors that wouldn't care if the expiration date was a day old or 2 days old or a week old. That's some good eating. And yet, because of government regulations, they're throwing stuff out. And it's a tragedy to me that our nation has so much in abundance that they throw away stuff that could take care of the needs of others. Verse 6 states that those who once ate fancy meals in nice homes are now rooting around in garbage dumps and searching for food in the dunghills. Sometimes I'll watch these feed the children things and you see exactly that happen. People rooting around for firewood to heat their homes, rooting around in garbage cans and just eat something. We just don't realize how good we got it. I would recommend anybody to take a missionary trip to some of these third world nations to just kind of get a perspective. It's a good thing for children to see. You know, we're worried about if our remote control is lost. We're worried if the cable goes out. We're worried if our cell phone is not charged up. When these people, rubber meets the road, they're worried about their next meal.
I recommend for anyone to take a mission into one of the big cities, Philadelphia, and just lay back in the cut. Watch. Watch the street people going into the trash cans, doing, making the wheel and dealing. It's sickening to your stomach to see that. And it doesn't need drink. It doesn't need a lot of people believes they're there by choice. And believe it or not, it's not by choice, by circumstance.
Yep. There's also a spiritual application to what's going on here. These people that once lived in fine houses were now rooting around in dunghill. 2 Peter 2:20. If you want to hold your place here, it's kind of prophetic. 2 Peter 2:20. Verse many are familiar with. For if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and then are again entangled therein, and overcome, the latter end is worse with them than the beginning. For it had been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness, than after they had known it to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. But it has happened unto them, according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow or the pig that was washed to her wallowing in the mire. Once you've been saved and tasted of the goodness of God, once you've seen the power of God through prayer, once you're given a glimpse of the glory of God, your life will never be the same. And it shouldn't be.
Right.
The day I got saved, I knew my life had changed. I knew things were different, and I knew that God was living inside of me. to have known the goodness of God, and then to go back to your old sinful ways. The Bible says it's like a dog returning to its vomit or a pig going back to the mud. These people of Israel once walked with God and knew God and saw the power of God and the glory of God. But they lost that because they forsook Him. Now they're rooting around in trash heaps, barely surviving. For a Christian to backslide, to go back into the muck and mire of sin, it's like embracing a dunghill. It's like going back to the cesspool of life. That's how God sees it. Verse 6. Lamentations 4:6. For the punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom, that was overthrown as in a moment, and no hands stayed on her. Here in verse 6 we are told that Jerusalem's punishment was worse than that of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom, if you remember, was destroyed by fire and brimstone. God literally vaporized all traces of Sodom. Jerusalem was the holy city of God. But like the people of Sodom, they turned their backs on God. Jerusalem should have known better. Luke 12:48 tells us this: for unto whomsoever much is given, much shall be required. Boy, that convicts me. I got 10 or 20 Bibles in my house. I got all kind of Christian books in my home. To whom much is given, much is required. There's people that don't know a whole lot about God, and they're not going to be held as accountable as those who know better. Sodom and Gomorrah was a wicked city. They didn't really know no better, but Jerusalem did. Because the people of Jerusalem knew God's word and knew God's commandments, much was expected of them. They were held to a greater accountability, and so also received a greater judgment. Sodom was destroyed in an instant, in a moment's time. Jerusalem, on the other hand, suffered a long, drawn-out, painful death. Death by starvation and thirst is one of the most horrible ways to die, and it can go on for months before it's over. And let me just add this. If God doesn't bring judgment upon America, then He owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. Now I'm speaking figuratively because God is God, and God's going to do what He's going to do, and He doesn't owe anyone an apology. But if God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for its ungodliness, mark her down. He's going to judge America because the same wickedness is going on today in this country.
And even worse.
It's even worse. This transgender stuff and gay pastors now and TV shows glorifying it. If God don't bring judgment on this nation, then there's something bad wrong. And I know that He will. Because God considers it an abomination, and I'm just saying that.
Yes.
Verse 7. Her Nazarites were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk. They were more ruddy in body than rubies. Their polishing was as of sapphire. Their visage or their faces is blacker than coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaves to their bones. It is withered and become like a stick. Here Jeremiah gives further details as to the tragedy that was going on in Jerusalem. The Nazarites, who had taken religious vows, were those who had their leaders. They were physically strong, the picture of health. Their countenance glowed with light. But after Jerusalem was under siege, those same Nazarites were now a shadow of their former self. Their visage or face was blackened like coal. Since there was no water in the city, bathing was out of the question. Many times to show mourning, they would throw soot up in the air, ashes up into the air, and let it fall upon them as a sign of mourning. They were probably doing a whole lot of that. Once everyone had recognized these holy men, they were given respect by the people of the city at one time. Now they were just like everyone else. Their clothes were ragged and dirty. Their bodies were ravaged by hunger. They suffered just like those around them. If you've ever seen pictures of the Holocaust, prisoners of war in concentration camps, you get an idea of what they must have looked like. Their skin was just taut upon for starvation. Verse 9. They that be slain with the sword are better than they that be slain with hunger. For these pine away, stricken through for want of the fruits of the field. You know it's bad when God says those that are killed swiftly with a sword are better than those that linger and suffer the ravages of starvation and thirst. Again, what these people suffered was horrible. People were crying out to be killed rather than to go through the pain of starvation. The same thing's going to happen during the tribulation. People are going to want to die. They're going to try to die, but God's not going to let them die during the tribulation, because that would be the easy way out. Because they rejected God, because they didn't receive Christ when they had the opportunity during the tribulation, those that try to take their lives, they ain't going to be allowed to die. You're going to see people busted up from jumping off of buildings, still walking around. You're going to see people with gunshot wounds that should be dead, that are still walking around. You're going to see people hurt themselves, and they're still going to be alive. Something to think about. Verse 10. The hands of the pitiful women have sodden their own children. They were their meat in the destruction of the daughter of my people. As if it wasn't bad enough that the children were now starving, here we read of women turning to cannibalism. Sodden means cooked. They were so desperate they started cooking their children. I can't comprehend that kind of hunger. I've had days where I was hungry, but I've never contemplated that. I looked at my dog a couple times and thought, man, I could get a couple meals out of that fat little dog. But I never contemplated something like this. But it just gives you an indication of how bad things were. The cause for the siege. Why the siege took place. Verse 12. The kings of the earth and all the inhabitants of the world would not have believed that the adversary and the enemy should have entered into the gates of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was a mighty fortified city that seemed invincible. No army was able to conquer it. But now the city lied in ruins. And all the kings of the earth marveled that an enemy army was able to defeat Israel. That the adversary and the enemy was able to enter the gates of Jerusalem. And if you study history, you'll find that all the wonderful churches that Paul established that are mentioned in the Bible, now in ruins, having been destroyed by enemy forces. And in America, churches that once preached the gospel, that once won souls to Jesus, that once were full, are now empty or shut down. And it's because our adversary, the devil, has been on the move, leading people astray. Hasn't been through persecution. Why isn't this church filled tonight? Well, people are somewhere else. They got something else going on, whether it's something on TV or something on the internet. Wherever they are, they aren't here. And this ain't the only church. So many churches across America are suffering a dirt because the enemy has distracted them away from the only thing that matters. And again, when you read about what's happening in Israel, you can see the same thing happen today. Carol and them, they've been in this church for a long time. They remember. Bill Adams was here. These churches were packed out. You didn't have to worry about who was going to show up back in the old days. And that was true for so many churches. But nowadays, there is a dirt where people have things. God is not in all their thoughts. And I say, God help us to that. Never lose sight of the fact that Satan is our adversary and he's on the move here in these last days. Any questions? Any thoughts? Verse 13. For the sins of her prophets and the iniquities of her priests that have shed the blood of the just in the midst of her, they have wandered as blind men in the streets. They have polluted themselves with blood so that men could not touch their garments. They cried unto them, Depart ye, it is unclean, depart, depart, touch not. When they fled away and wandered, they said among the heathen, They shall no more sojourn there. The anger of the Lord hath divided them. He will no more regard them. They respected not the persons of the priests. They favored not the elders. One cause of Jerusalem's siege was that the fall was the sins of the prophets and the iniquities of the priests. Jeremiah came along saying, listen, you all need to get this matter right. You need to get right with God because he's bringing judgment. And he was in prison for telling the truth. Jerusalem was full of false prophets. Said, no, it's going to be all right. Help is on the way. Be at peace. Everything's going to be all right. And the people believed the false prophets. Israel's spiritual leaders, who were the intercessors between God and the people, became corrupt. These men of God who were supposed to guide the people in the way to go became lost themselves. And as Jesus said about the Pharisees, if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. And that's exactly what happened. The false prophets, the blinded leaders, led the people astray. And rather than heed prophet after prophet who they killed, that was their downfall. We're seeing the same problem today. Men in the pulpit who are not walking with God, or who are in it for the money. Some cases may not even be saved. Add to that women pastors, which is unscriptural, homosexual pastors, which is an out and out abomination. And it's being accepted as okay. And again I say, God help us. Verse 17, just about done. As for us, our eyes as yet fail for our vain help. In our watchings we have watched for a nation that could not save us. They hunt our steps, that we cannot go in our streets. Our end is near, our days are fulfilled, for our end is come. Our persecutors are swifter than the eagles of the heavens. They pursued us upon the mountains. They laid wait for us in the wilderness. If the first cause of Jerusalem's siege was the sins of the prophets and priests, the second cause was being unequally yoked with pagan nations. And rather than trust God for help and protection, they turned to Egypt for help and for protection against Babylon. Both Jeremiah and Ezekiel had warned them against the futility of foreign allies. Instead, he wanted them to trust in God, and they wouldn't do it. We are an independent church. We have no mother church over us. There is no church committee that comes around telling us what we should preach. You will find these things in Methodist churches, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Protestant, and Catholic churches. They have mother churches over them. Being independent, we answer no one but God. Amen. But the other side of it is this. If we run into a financial problem, or if we face some great problem, we got to face it alone. Right. We can't call the Pope up to send some help. Again, by faith, we got to trust God for every need. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Verse 18 states, the end is near. The end is near. Our end has come. Man, you don't have to be a Bible scholar to realize we are living in the last days. Pick up a newspaper, watch the news. I believe the Lord's coming back in our lifetime. I don't say that casually. So many signs. The fact that they're experimenting with these microchips, and they're already putting microchips in people. They're putting them in animals, working out all the details. The fact that we're seeing America go down the tubes, the once great nation. The fact that we're seeing terrorism on the rise. So many other factors. Indication we're living in the last days. We need to remind ourselves the end is near. We don't got all the time in the world. As I said this morning, the laborers thought they had 4 months for the harvest. Jesus said, it's later than you think. That's where we're at today.
Every now and then we're up and I hear somebody speaking about the Bible or something like that. I'll be like, well, I hope you know we're living in the book of Revelation here. We're living in the last book of the Bible right now, right? And my friend Rick goes, well, what's that supposed to mean? I said, you should know that by now.
Yep.
You know, everything the book of Revelation says, you see different things like that happening all over the world.
Yep.
Not just now in the United States, but everywhere.
Yep. Well, one of the things that was it, go ahead.
I want to ask a question. This is going over my mind right now. Do you feel that Satan laughs at us for the stupid things that we listen to, and he goes to God and says, this is your child?
I would have to believe so, because America has become so gullible with some of these cults like Scientology. It's like, it makes me laugh when I see that people are willing to follow some of these weird things. It's got to make him laugh that here's the truth right here in front of us, and yet people are getting caught up in cults and all kind of weird stuff. And it's got to make them laugh to think, man, these people will buy anything, and they will. Whatever's the latest thing out there, they're willing. So, I mean, I think he comes up with stuff just to see how gullible people are. So without a doubt, I think so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sure that the Christians, okay, that does not listen to God's word, they're doing, but they're not doing. They're cardinals, okay? I picture God saying, "Oh, my child," but Satan's laughing in God's face and saying, "This is your child that you are taking care of."
Yeah.
Where's the trust?
Well, the good side of this is this. God's going to get the last laugh. The devil may be laughing now, but he's a defeated foe. And for all the nonsense, he's going to lose in the end. And God's going to get the last laugh because he's going to be spending his eternity in the lake of fire.
Yeah, Satan being the first and best liar ever. Right? The greatest lie he's ever told. Convince the world that he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, since the world doesn't believe he exists, he doesn't exist, God doesn't exist. All this falseness, spirituality, witchcraft, tree hut, all these things are true. Satan's lied so much he's lied to himself and he believes himself.
Yeah.
The truth is in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
He's read it once or twice.
Yeah.
He won't believe it. He still doesn't believe that God is all-knowing and powerful. So who is the last?
Good.
There's no one what the truth is.
Rich mentioned that we're living in the book of Revelation. And symbolically, the time right before the Lord's return is considered the Laodicean church age, the church age that was marked by lukewarmness. And it just reminded me of another funny scene in that movie where the old saint of God asked the lady, "How do you like your coffee?" And she said, "Hot." And she gave her lukewarm coffee. And it was to let her know, you don't like the taste of lukewarm coffee, well, neither does God like lukewarmness. And you're either hot or cold for God. But if you're lukewarm, God says he will spit you out of his mouth. And that's where a lot of folks are today. They're not hot, they're not cold, they're just kind of lukewarm. So
what about cold?
Yeah. So it's something to think about. The time of the Lord's return is just about upon us. And whatever we hope to do for God, we got to get busy now, today. Verse 20, and I'm done. The breath of our nostrils, the anointed of the Lord, was taken in their pits, of whom we said, under the shadow we shall live among the heathen. The third cause of Jerusalem's siege was Zedekiah, her king. Zedekiah was the Lord's anointed. The word anointed was used of the kings of Israel because oil was poured upon their heads to indicate they were set apart for the task of God. When Jerusalem fell, Zedekiah tried to escape toward the Jordan River, but he was caught. His children were killed before his eyes. They put out his eyes and took him away in chains. Israel's leaders were powerless to help before the enemy. So there's the three causes of the downfall of Jerusalem, and every one of them are bad. We're hoping that a good man gets elected president, but I'm not putting my trust in whoever's elected president, whoever it may be. I'm putting my trust in God. No elected official is going to turn this country back to God. I don't care if he's even a Christian. It's Christians on their knees. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. That's the only thing that will bring revival. So we need to realize that, Heavenly Father, good